This is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another RPG Storytime. Wow, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but don't worry, I've got a couple more in the pipeline, so I hope I'm going to continue to share these stories with you for a while. Some may be on specific things, some may be just be rambling about things that I've seen, and things that I've done, and things that I've collected over my RPG experience. Just kind of a chance for me to go ahead and tell some stories. But this one in particular, I had to think on this one for a bit because I wasn't sure whether I was going to go ahead and tell this story because it's been a while and I don't really want to single the guy out. But it came up again in another game I've played recently, and that is people who play weird character types, or people who just go ahead and propose strange character types. I don't mean ones that have a certain quirk or something. I mean ones that are like monstrous in nature, or ones that are completely different from what you'd expect for a particular campaign. Some of these people that propose these sorts of characters just like to play strange things as an effort to stand out through the character's concept rather than through actual characterization. Maybe they just like playing monstrous creations, but sometimes they prefer to play these creatures in order to obtain a mechanical advantage. And that is where some problems come in. Because it's amazing how many people will sit there and play or ask to play a monstrous character, seeing this idea for a very specialized type of character, but they just don't think things through all the way. And this has happened a few times really, but this happened especially badly in one of my campaigns from a few years back. It was a Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 campaign, and we'd actually been going at it for a while, and then someone wanted to join in, and I said, sure, go ahead, come up with a character concept, and go ahead and roll it, and we'll go ahead and let you see what happens. And this guy, he understood the thematic principles of the campaign. So he didn't come up with a weird character in order to break the theme and the feel of the campaign. But he did come up with a monstrous character type that he wanted to play in order to maximize a particular statistic and ability for mechanical advantage over supposedly foes that he'd encounter, and also the other characters. But he didn't really give his choice much in the way of practical thought and practical consideration, because what he had in mind was a half-ogre, and not just any half-ogre, but one which took all appropriate steps to become a large creature. Because what he wanted to do was to build this min-maxed half-ogre in 3.5 rules with an aim to using chains, spike chains, because in 3.5 spike chains gave you, an additional reach. So he was aiming for a large creature with an extended reach from a feat using large spike chains. So he could use them over a large swath of battlefield and just trip people up and hit them willy-nilly. And on paper, this is one of those ideas that on paper is extremely effective. Not so much in practice. And he was so intent on this that he used all of the starting gold I'd assembled, because they weren't first level. They'd advanced a couple levels. I gave him some starting gold because he was making the character at, I believe, level 3 or 4. And he used all that starting gold to basically maximize his ability with those chains. He didn't take any missile weapons. He barely took the bare minimum of adventuring gear, just basically food and a backpack. And I said, okay, well, that's a weird idea. Are you sure that you want to run with this? I will let you, and at this point, he had already sat in on a few sessions. So he'd seen the way that the current adventurers were working, and he'd seen what sorts of challenges they were facing, and he'd most importantly seen where they were adventuring. And the rest of the adventurers at this point were still clearing out this massive underground kobold complex. It was a dungeon built by kobolds with some parts that were built by other people but adapted to the kobold's stature and tactics. And he said, no, I really want to play this half-ogre. You said you'd let me. And I said I'd let you do a lot of things. It doesn't mean it's a good idea. I said, no, I think this half-ogre would be excellent. And so I said, well, okay, look, I'm not going to argue with you. The build uses everything that I said I would allow. Go ahead and do it. But I need to tell you this. Number one, there's no half-ogres or ogres in general. There's no half-ogres or ogres in general in the immediate vicinity of where the characters are. So, and they know this because these characters have been very thorough in clearing the area out so far. If there was a half-ogre or an ogre of any sort, they would have known it. So you're going to have to start a settlement or two away. As a result, you're probably going to have to travel there. Now, we could hand wave it. Or, because it's a slow week and the rest of the characters, or like half of the rest of the group wasn't even there. They were just, chilling out. I said, or because I generally start characters at the minimum level for the level at which the lowest current character is. So if we've got a party of like 3 level 3s and a couple level 4s, a new character will start at level 3, but at the minimum experience for that level 3. So I said, what I can let you do is, because you want to get to the party, and you want to gain some experience. And he nodded, yeah, I do. So I said, okay, I'll run the trip there and see what you encounter. I've got all the random tables set up. It's just basically up to you to go ahead and travel to where the group is. I don't even care while you're traveling. You're a half-ogre. You basically go from town to town. He said, yeah, that sounds good. And then he said, I would rather play this out because it'll give me some experience and it may give me a chance to get some treasure before I reach the group, because I spent everything on this magic chain and a little bit of armor. So we were settled on that. We all agreed on that. So he starts walking out there through the woods. And it's a very basic sandbox travel thing where he's walking along the road. It's not well patrolled terrain, so there's monsters and stuff in the area, but he's sticking to the road. He's doing a pretty good job. And I'm rolling my dice, and I generally have these random encounter tables that, while they're not pegged to the level of the group, if there's something that's not of the level or that's a different variation of the level, there's usually some warning. And he got pretty lucky. He was rolling, he rolled a couple wolves, I think, and he made really short work of those, proving that his chain idea was really working. And then the next thing he rolled was a little tiny red dragon. Not a huge one. I think this was like challenge rating like 3, maybe. So it was approximately his level in challenge rating, although, of course, challenge rating assumes an entire group. But in this instance, it was just a little red dragon, so I was like, well, this little red dragon isn't going to really attack him. Now, I didn't say this. This is like my thinking. The little red dragon is just barely a wormling. It can flutter around, breathe a little fire, and maybe taunt him. So what this little red dragon is going to do is going to fly up and basically harass him. Basically saying, hey, this is my area. You need to give me money or I'll do something. But since he's a little tiny red dragon, that he's the dragon itself is afraid that it might get one hit by this big half-ogre, but it's still going to harass him from afar. So, this little dragon came up, and I tried to be cute about it. I was playing it off like comic relief. And this half-ogre, the player, this little red dragon flies up to him and says, "This is my lair. You'll pay the toll or else. I demand 5 gold to pass." And this half-ogre had like 30, 40 gold on him still. He had more in pocket change. He could have paid this dragon off. Or he could have, disregarded it and walked past. No. Instead, this guy just looks at this little dragon and just turns into this spiel where he's just insulting this little dragon and calling it out and playing all big and tough, but not in an intimidating way, more like a I'm going to go ahead and try to humiliate you kind of way. And so I'm sitting there going, well, he's not he's not and I asked him, "Are you using intimidate to try and scare the dragon away?" He goes, "No, I'm just, you know, I'm just gonna call him out. He's a little lizard. I don't have to take this." And so he's basically just walking around, like just randomly going off, disrespecting this little dragon. And I'm sitting there confused because I'm not sure how this dragon's gonna react. And just as I'm trying to figure out how this dragon's gonna react, the player then says, "Okay, now after I say that, after I call him like basically a little handbag on wings, I'm gonna, just totally disregard him. He's just a little lizard. I don't really care. I'm gonna take a swing at him with my chains." And I'm like, "Holy shit!" He's gonna go ahead and attack him and start combat. So he does. He swings at him and he manages to miss because he rolls poorly, and the dragon flies away. I'm like, "Okay, yeah, the little dragon flies about 50 feet up." And the half-ogre's like, "Oh, well, that's out of the range of my chains." And then I'm thinking to myself, this guy has been insufferable about this chain build. And he's just basically insulted this little dragon. This little dragon is young and it's inexperienced, but it's not stupid. It's not stupid. And so this little dragon, looks you over from where he's flying around overhead. And he's sputtering and cursing because you drove him off. And I say, okay, so the little dragon looks you over. And I'm rolling spot checks for the dragon because the dragon's looking him over, seeing what he has on him. And he's making no attempt to hide it because he doesn't have that much. He's just shouting at the dragon, come down here, and I'll go ahead and finish you off." And so I'm like, okay, well, you know what the little dragon does? He flies off for a little bit. And so the player of the half-ogre just kind of sits there, just shaking his head. I'm like, "Oh, god damn it, this was a complete waste of time. Do I get experience for it?" And I say, "No, you didn't defeat him. The little dragon's still out there." "Oh, but I made him run off." "Well, we'll see about that." And that puts him on guard because suddenly he's realizing, wait a minute, the encounter may not be over. So he sits there screaming at the air for a little while. And I'm like, well, he doesn't come back for now. And so finally the half-ogre gets tired and turns to continue down the road. And as he does, I had the little dragon buzz out of the sky and strafe him with a breath weapon. And then continue onward. And so he takes a minimum damage. I mean, this is like just a few hit points of damage. And he's like, "God damn it, somebody just buzzed me and set me on fire." And he goes and pats himself out. He's like, "Come back down here and I'll kill you." And I'm like, at this point, the little dragon realizes that the half-ogre has no way of attacking him. And so the little dragon's flying up in the air, and I can't remember. I think at that time in 3.5, Dragon Breath had a cooldown, but not necessarily a limit like it did in second edition and so forth, or in new games. And so, this little dragon's circling overhead, and he's sitting there shouting at it, and he turns to go back on his way, and a couple rounds have passed. In fact, close to about 2 minutes have passed. He starts on his way, and then out of the sky, little dragon comes around, shoosh, and streams by and pegs him in the back of the head with another breath weapon. And at this point, he's realizing, oh shit, wait a minute, this could add up. This dragon's only doing like minimal damage, like a couple points of damage each time, but that's going to add up. And then his half-ogre starts getting a little bit frightened, and it's like, well, it's staying out of range. I can't fight it. I have no ranged weapons because I thought, all I was going to do was fight with the chains. And so he starts, heading down the road. And I'm kind of, I have the little dragon flying behind him, like being a constant menace, but not actually strafing him again. So he's just jogging down the road. And this dragon's, in the meantime, basically talking trash at the back of his head, going, I made you run. You look at you, you're running away like a coward. And he's sitting there jogging down the road trying to find some cover. And he finally finds it in this little, there's this off the road, there's like this ruined, it used to be a watchtower, but it's just like the shell of a watchtower now. So he runs in there, and the little dragon flies by, strafes him, and pegs him on the back of the head one last time before he jumps into the tower. And he's sitting there hiding in there, and I'm having this little dragon like fly around the place, just basically talking trash. And he's like, oh man, I need to get some sort of ranged weapon at this point. So he's sitting there and he does a search of the place, and he finds he finds like a I throw him a bone. I say, hey, you find a crossbow, and you find some old bolts, and they're medium sized. So you're going to take a penalty to it. And he looks at him, and I shit you not, he says to me, the player says to me, I don't use crossbows. That's not my deal. So he knows he needs a ranged weapon, but he doesn't use crossbows. Well, what was he expecting? And so I said, well, okay, it's up to you. And so he looks around the place and says, are you sure there's no more weapons? I said, yes, there's just the crossbow with some bolts. I don't use crossbows. And I'm just shaking my head at this point. So finally what he does is he takes a rock, just a rock from the debris, and he walks out and he chucks it at the dragonling. And he manages to peg it. And he does minimal damage to it. But I'm thinking, you know what? This dragonling's had enough. He gets hit for a couple points of damage and runs off. And then, the half-ogre sits there and cheers and such. And I'm like, yeah, take your experience, whatever, man. And he gets the experience. He doesn't get any treasure, of course, because he drove this thing off. But he continues on his way. And I'm just shaking my head over the whole thing. And a few times on that trip, I think he encountered like 3 more things in that trip. One of them was another handful of wolves. One of them was a merchant, which he was rude to, but otherwise didn't engage in combat with, thankfully. And then finally, he encountered some bandits. And this time, even though they did like 3 rounds worth of ranged fire on him, which of course he couldn't return because he didn't have a ranged weapon. And he finally closed into melee and took him down. And at this point, he was like, man, you love throwing ranged creatures at me. I'm like, yes, that's what ranged things are for. That's why you have bows. And he was like, well, whatever, you're picking on me. And I'm like, holy crap, man, this guy is like super entitled. And the other players that were watching this are just shaking their heads at this point because they're like, man, this guy, what is he doing? Anyway, so he gets to the group, and I'm like, okay, well, we're going to call it for this session, and we'll continue next time with meeting the group. And he's like, yeah, well, you better DM better next time. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, yeah, don't pick on me anymore. And I'm just shaking my head. I'm like, what kind of, like, I don't say it, but I'm thinking it, and the rest of my role playing group is knowing that I'm thinking it because it's the kind of thing I do. I'm like, what kind of asshole joins? I mean, this guy had not played with us before. He joined us midway through a campaign. I let him because we didn't really have a spot, but it wasn't like a really full group. And what kind of asshole joins a campaign like that, insists on playing like a monstrous character, gets his way, and then calls the dungeon master out for not tailoring every encounter to his particular character? Oh man, it was a bad sign. So the next week rolls around and we reconvene, and lo and behold, he's there. So I invite him back in. I said, well, it's good of you to return. And he says, yeah, I might have got a little pissed off last week. And I'm like, just so long as you leave it at the door, man. We're all trying to be playing fair here. And he gets around, and we get settled down. We start playing. And by this time, he's seen the group play in this dungeon complex several times. And I did mention it was built and staffed by kobolds. And he's basically been watching their combat but blowing off the rest of the descriptions at this point, I'm pretty sure. And so he meets the rest of the group, and the first thing he does when he meets the rest of the party is his character is just so rude to them. He starts calling them all kinds of names, and I'm like, are you sure you're going to be doing that to somebody you just met? And one of the players was playing a knight, and he's like, oh man, this half-ogre is settling for a fight. Let's get it on. And the rest of the party talks the knight down for a moment because, you know, they don't want to piss off their new party member, even though this guy is acting not like any party member. He's acting just like some stranger on the street, which he is, but one that wants a fight. And so it's right off. There's this huge clash as to whether this character, not the player, but the character is going to even fit in the group. And I'm like, well, your alignment is chaotic neutral. It's not chaotic evil. I said, yeah, I know. I'm just playing it like that. And, you know, see my chaotic alignment, or my neutral alignments video for more on my thoughts on that matter. And I'm like, well, and he's like, well, I'm playing my charisma. And I'm like, dude, your charisma is 10. He's like, so that's real low. What? A 10 is dead average, right? And if, for those of you who know D&D, pretty much every edition, a 10 is dead average. Dead average people don't greet strangers and assault them. Dead average people don't, I mean, they're average, but they don't go out of their way to offend people. And this guy is. And he seemed to think that anything less than a 14 was, like, really poor, which I need to get to sometimes, because I know a lot of people will see, like, a character with, like, 9 or 8 intelligence and play him like a raving idiot. That's not the case. It's just a little bit below average. And this guy was thinking like the dead average charisma was meant he had to be this rude jerk ass to everybody. And I tried to correct him. I was like, that's not quite 10 charisma. Yeah, well, you don't tell me how to play my character. And I'm like, okay, man, it is up to the rest of the party whether they want to drag you along. And immediately, like, it was a 4-person party. Immediately, 3 of them were like, I don't know if we want this guy. And then the player of that half-ogre starts going, you made me make a character in Journey here and I was like, in Journey here just so you could blow me off. And I'm like, dude, calm down, everyone, calm down. And finally, the knight, the guy that was playing the knight chimes up and said, nah, let's bring him along. I want to see how he works. And they begrudgingly let this half-ogre join up. And so they leave town and they return to this dungeon, which they've been going through for a long time. And at this point, I see more trouble brewing. Because they get to the dungeon complex. And it's just like this valley that goes in. And they've got 3 entrances. And they're all small-sized. Yeah, that's right. A medium-sized character, has to squeeze to get in there. And so there's the rest of the group starts getting on their hands and knees and squeezing into these little entrances. And so the half-ogre player says, okay, I squeeze in after him. And I said, hold on there, my friend. He's like, what? I'm like, dude, you're a large creature. You can squeeze down to a medium-sized thing, but not like a 2.5, not like a half-square corridor. You can't squeeze through the passage unless you find some way to get down. And he just goes off on me. He starts shouting and yelling, oh, you're picking on me. What the? And I'm like, dude, these guys have been in this dungeon for now 2 months, clearing this dungeon room by room. It's a pretty big dungeon, pretty complex dungeon. And that we didn't get a lot done per session. We got like 3 or 4 encounters done at most per session. So they've been in there for like the equivalent of like 2 or 3 months. Real time, not game time. And I said, and you sat through 2 of those sessions and watched as they squeezed in each and every time. I told you that your character might not fit in with the rest of the group. And he said, I thought you meant because I was a monster. I said, no, it's because you were playing a freaking giant. You're playing a large-sized creature. What did you expect? And the rest of the group is just laughing their asses off like they're players. And I'm like, hold on, don't make fun of other players. And they're like, oh, sorry, we didn't mean it that way. And so so I say, look, if you can come up with a way for your half-ogre to go ahead and get in there, let me know. And he sits and thinks on it for a while. And he finally just sulks. And he's like, never mind. And I'm like, are you sure that's what you want to do? And he's like, yeah, I'm sure. And I even invite him. I say, look, while the rest of them start their adventure, and as soon as I say that, the rest of the group's like, yeah, sure, let's start the adventure. We're ready to go. And I'm like, while the rest of the group does their adventure, do you want to look around for another entrance? No, I don't need another entrance. I'm just going to sit here and guard the exit. I'm like, oh my God. So he basically sits that session out. That entire session he sits out. And the rest of the players go into this dungeon. They explore it. And they have fun with it. And, you know, we have a session like 3 hours long. And this guy's just getting more and more pissed off. Because during this exploration, they have to squeeze through 3 or 4 other places. Not all of the places are like small tunnels. But there's some places where it expands. And at one point, they even come by an old door that is actually large size. So it's actually like a big cavernous area where they could enter. And one of them says, hey, should we go get the Half-Ogre and see where this door goes? And at this point, the player of the Half-Ogre perks up. And then one of the guys that his Half-Ogre had insulted chimes in, nah, I really don't want that guy with us anyway. Oh my God, that was like cold as hell. But I can't blame them, because this guy was really abrasive. And that guy just kind of sat down and getting more and more pissed off. And, you know, and they had concluded the adventure. And this guy's like, well, see if I ever sit in on one of your games again. And I'm like, dude, you came in and you made a real, you know, you were a real jerk to everybody out of character as well as in character. You're sitting here sulking because your character, you couldn't think of a way to get your character in. What did you expect me to do? This was an adventure in progress. And he didn't have an answer for that. And then one of the other players, and I wish he hadn't brought this up because it set this guy off again. One of the other players said, yeah, you know what? I had my wizard actually prepare reduce person. But after your character was such a jerk to everybody, he declined to mention it. And that set that guy off again, and it was just ridiculous. He never joined in on any more of our adventures, but it was ridiculous. He was out of character. There was some serious stuff, man. This is the kind of player that when he walks to the table is immediately the kind of guy that is not gonna really work with your group, and you can tell right off the bat because this guy was aggressive right off the bat. He was insulting out of character, like from player to player. He played a character that was a min-max character for one purpose only. He didn't think things through all the way, and then he got personally insulted when things didn't go his way. So this is lesson learned. Character size does matter sometimes. If you're going to be playing with a bunch of human characters in a relatively small tunnel system, you might want to rethink you're playing a big giant. So it does matter. Now, it can be a benefit sometimes. If you're playing in an adventure where you go through a lot of giant buildings, sometimes the other side is going to be a burden. Sometimes a small character is going to be a burden because they're not going to be able to make certain steps and certain jumps, but it's a lot easier to compensate for a smaller character than it is for a much, much larger character. And the second thing I learned from this, aside from don't bring a jerk to the table, is that if you're going to burden your group with an out there kind of monster character, just don't be an ass about it. If you want to, if your DM is going to allow you to play a character that is out there that doesn't really fit their campaign, don't take that as a sign you should be entitled to have the rest of the campaign readjusted to your character. If everybody is humans and dwarves, or a mix of the standard fantasy races, and your DM is kind enough to let you play a lizard man or something like that doesn't really fit the campaign, but they're nice enough to do so anyway, don't be an ass to him or her. Just treat them with respect, because they're doing you a solid on that, and they don't have to. They don't have to. So anyway, man, I will never get over just this guy's face as his Half-Ogre sat there outside the dungeon, because he couldn't fit. Anyway, I'll see you again with another RPG story time pretty soon. We're going to bring this series back. We're going to bring Tabletops and Taverns back. Going to do a lot of tabletop stuff. This has been the RPG Crawler. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you've got feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. If you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/rpgcrawler, or through the links at the end of the video or in the description below. Until next time, take care and goodbye.